Happy Tuesday and welcome to Raquel's Modern Life. My name is Raquel Williams and I'm your millennial big sister. Or I guess I could be your little sister. And if we're the exact same age, then that makes us fraternal twins. Nice to meet you. I'm currently recording this from inside of my closet. My apartment here in New York is about the size of a closet out west, so you can imagine the size of the closet I'm in right now. My knees are up to my elbows and we're getting cozy. I have my cup of tea here and I've got a bunch of jackets whacking me in the face. The reason why I'm in the closet, I mean, I'm not like in the closet. Let's get that very clear. I am out of the closet. But the reason why I'm physically in a closet right now is because my neighbor's bass is just thrumming through all of the walls. It feels like an ant farm just vibrating with life. And hopefully you can't hear it. So a little bit about me. I'm an early 30s. So early, like practically 20s, like practically early 20s, but I'm an early 30 person living in New York City, as I established, just kind of trying to figure out life, as many of us are. And I've had a lot of successes, I've had a lot of failures, and through it all, I've just had so many adventures, and most of them were misadventures, but I learned something from all of them, right? And my modus operandi is that instead of you having to learn the hard way like I did, I could just impart my knowledge onto you and you can skip to the next level, the amazing level that I'm on today. If you're listening to this and you know me, you probably know that I was on America's Next Top Model in 2015 on cycle 22. If you don't know that, surprise! It's something that I don't really volunteer too often unless it comes up in conversation. And you'd be surprised at how often it does. Especially, I think, post-pandemic, everyone's gotten like more nostalgic about reality TV. There was also a documentary that came out recently with Lisa from Cycle 5. I have not watched that documentary yet. Definitely going to, and definitely going to let you all know what I think about it, but it hasn't happened yet, so I will not be speaking about that now. But the lore surrounding this show is so crazy and everyone's so fascinated and a bunch of NDAs are expiring. And so it's a weird time to have been involved in all of this because everyone's talking about it and I can, I have a story of my own. So if you don't remember me from cycle 22, that's probably because I was only on it for one day. I was eliminated in the very first round. And for many years, I refused to talk about it. I was so embarrassed. I wish that I hadn't even done it a lot of the time. And it wasn't the experience that I thought it was going to be. Which, in hindsight, I don't know why I thought it was going to be something special. I mean, at that point, it was cycle 22. I had met girls who were on the show. I'd seen how these careers sometimes played out. The illusion was already sort of dropped, like the veil was dropped for me, but I was 23 years old and I was like, this is gonna be different. I'm gonna be different. Not me though, I'm different, right? I mean, I don't regret that. You have to go into every experience in life with optimism and of maybe a healthy dash of naivete in order to just, I don't know, not be a cynic and to just be open to new experiences, right? And as you're gonna learn, I was naive, but it's okay. At this point, all these many years later, I can say that I actually don't regret it. So, in order to tell you my story about being on America's Next Top Model, I have to take you back 10 years prior to when I was 13 years old. Now, I was always like this, how do I say this? Tall, lanky string bean of a kid, towering over everyone else. Definitely not cool. Just so awkward. And for the most part, I got made fun of. But when I was about 11, 12, people started telling me like, oh, you should be a model. Not people my own age, but like random adults at the mall. And I thought that they were making fun of me. Because everyone my own age had nothing nice to say about the way that I looked, I was too tall, I was too skinny, my eyes were too big, my nose was too big, my smile was too big, everything was too whatever. So when people started being like, oh, you should be a model, um, first I thought they were making fun of me, and then I also thought, oh, they're saying I'm tall and skinny, which I saw as a very bad thing, you know? Um, I didn't have the life experience to know that that might be considered a beauty standard, because to me, it very much was not. It was like the early 2000s. I was really into MTV. I was like, God, I can't wait till I'm old enough to get a boob job and, you know, a butt job. And when I'm older, maybe there'll be a surgery to make me 5'3" kind of thing. Like, I did not like the way I looked at all. So even when people told me, oh, you should be a model, I'm like, ew, like, who would want to be that? Um, didn't think it was a good thing. Anyway, and I'd just like to point out that this was 10 years ago. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I'm not tall or skinny enough to be a model, that is not true. It wasn't really true then. They did have, curved divisions, petite divisions, but now especially those things are actually really sought after in the modeling industry. So don't take this as a indication of what the current industry is like. So around that age is when the show first came out. I don't think I started watching it until maybe the second or third season. The ads, by the way, were so cool. I remember being really intrigued by them. And it's not that I didn't want to be a model. It's just when you're 13, 12, you are so concerned with like, what is my identity? And I wasn't a girly girl. I wasn't popular, obviously. And so I really was like, oh, I'm very anti-feminine. I'm a tomboy. I'm alternative. Being a model has nothing to do with that. But like low key in my heart, I did want to. So watching America's Next Top Model showed me that being a model is not a personality type, it's a job. And there are so many different types of people who choose it. Of course, there are those very girly girls. There are more tomboyish or alternative or even queer girls on the show. And that just like blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean you can be smart in a model? And the funny thing is, like, even those feminine, girly, typical model girls, we're also just people, which I know, as an adult talking to another adult, you're like, no shit. But to my 13-year-old self with my 13 years of life experience, that was groundbreaking to me. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? This is what I want to be when I grow up. Flash forward a few years later, my senior year of high school, I was voted most likely to be America's Next Top Model for my yearbook. And I don't know how many times I have to say it, but I was not cool. I was not popular. People didn't hate me. I just kind of, kept to myself. So to win that was kind of crazy. At that point, I was heavily invested in the show, so it meant a lot to me. But the funniest thing is, for that picture for the yearbook, they scheduled it. So, the superlatives, like most likely to, they scheduled that photo shoot during our spirit week and it was luau day. So I am in this picture and I didn't know that they were going to take this picture that day. And I'm wearing a sarong skirt that I got from Hawaii, a Pirates of the Caribbean tank top with Johnny Depp's fucking face on it, and a hibiscus hair clip. And I'm like, the hallway is my runway. I got low-key roasted for that, but you know what? It was so funny. Like, whoever decided that that day is when we were going to do the pictures is a comedy genius, honestly. But yeah, so I was kind of like, wait, is this something that could actually happen? And so I go to college in 2009 and I make a bunch of friends, and I overhear two of them talking one day about the America's Next Top Model casting. So my head whips around like the exorcist and I say, oh, can I come? So we go to Caesar's Palace because I went to college in Las Vegas, and we're in this ballroom and we're waiting in line forever, and there are photographers from the news or wherever. It was definitely the blog era, so who knows. I was like serving looks, mogging. as they would say today, just like posing. And these other girls in line were looking at me like, who is that? Or maybe they were just like, who the fuck is that? Like, shut the Either way, I felt like very main character, or at least I was projecting that. Anyway, so they put us in this ballroom and they line us up around the perimeter. And it's at this point, I would say probably 200 people. It's hard for me to remember now, but I think it was 200 girls. This was before it was co-ed. So they line us up. We all have a number on our chest, a little paper, and they go around, they look at everyone, and then they say, okay, if we call your number, please step forward. So they call a bunch of numbers, mine is one of them, and we all step forward. And then they say, okay, if we didn't call your number, you can go. Bye. So my friends are freaking out and they're like, oh my God, how are you going to get home? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'll figure it out, bye. And so that was crazy. And so I think at this point, and I'm really just guessing now because it was 15 years ago, but I think there's probably like 20 of us left at that point. And then from there, they were measuring our height, asking us a few questions, just getting an idea of who we were. And they narrowed it down to 4. And from there, they sat at this table just whispering to each other for so long. And I'm getting so nervous. I'm like, if they send me home now, I'm gonna fucking riot. But they said, okay, so in like this number and this number, you can go. And then it was just me and another girl left. And so at this point, I'm like, what are we gonna do? Fight to the death? What's happening here? And the casting directors, and I didn't know this at the time, but she's like the main casting director for ANTM. But she said, okay, congratulations, you're semifinalists. We're going to need you to come back tomorrow. And before you do, please fill out all of this paperwork. And that was the NDA and a bunch of personality stuff, contact information, everything. And I think I went and got an expedited passport ordered that day because it was a requirement. So I leave the casting. My friends are gone. I don't know how I'm getting home. I ended up walking back to my dorm actually because it wasn't that far. But before I did, I went to the Dolce & Gabbana store at the Caesar's Palace shops and tried on a bunch of dresses and shoes because I was just like, well, this is my life now. I'm going to be a famous model who wears Dolce & Gabbana and I better just get used to it. I was manifesting, or at least I thought I was. And I come back the next day and I'm put in this room with a girl who I had auditioned with the day before and 2 other girls from Vegas. One of them was named Krista. And we're brought into another room with 8 other girls, making it 12 total. And so we're the Nevada segment. There's girls from Arizona, Colorado, and Utah, maybe New Mexico as well. But basically, it was like the Southwest region. This was everyone's second time. People were like, oh, I sold my couch to be here, like really playing up their stories as if you've ever seen the show. You're not wrong to do that. That's definitely a way in. I thought I was going to really win them over making inappropriate jokes. And that didn't happen. No one was laughing. It was so awkward. When I left, I was like, you know what? I really don't think I got that. I think I was flying a little too close to the sun and just like trying to impress everyone, and it wasn't working out for me. Time goes by and I don't hear anything, and I'm thinking, shit, like I didn't get it. A couple months later, Cycle 14 comes out, and I see Krista is on it, the girl from my audition. And that's exciting to me because I'm like, okay, well, at least if I didn't make it on, like someone from Vegas did. She was the only one out of that group of 12 who made it on. So I was like, okay, it was very competitive. Like maybe I didn't fuck it up. Maybe they just preferred her. Like totally fine. And at the end of the cycle, she won. And that made me feel even better because I'm like, okay, well, if I had to lose to someone in that casting, it was the literal winner of the show. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this discourage me. If anything, getting that far the first time encouraged me more. In like the later end of my freshman year in 2010, I found out about a casting in Phoenix. So I went all the way down to Phoenix. I think one of my parents must have drove me there. At this point, I had blonde hair In the prior one, I had black hair, and this is significant because getting ahead here, but the times I've had blonde hair, the castings did not go far at all. And when I had dark hair, they did. Anyway, so I go to Phoenix, do the whole casting process, nothing. I think they had us come in one at a time. It was weird. It was like a whole different type of casting, but didn't hear anything. Flash forward a couple years. It's 2012. I find out about another casting in LA. I apply in advance rather than just showing up, and I get approved. I'm going to LA. And at this point, this is my third city. I've auditioned in Vegas, Phoenix, and now LA. So I'm chasing that high of the first time. I get there. It's crazy. The expedited line took at least 10 hours. So I don't know how long everyone else was there. For those 10 hours, I'm sitting next to a girl I was like talking to most of the time. And on my other side was a guy named Marvin. At first he was kind of quiet, but once we included him in the conversation, he was really outgoing and flirting with everyone, but in that kind of innocuous way where you're just like, oh, haha. Just a really, really funny dude. And we exchanged info, I think, Instagram. Also during that audition, first of all, for these auditions, they tell you like don't wear any makeup, don't have your hair styled, like wear a tank top and leggings, looks like a blank slate, you know? So while we were waiting, I noticed this girl who was wearing A-line dress and black eyeshadow and hula hooping around with high-heeled boots. And I was like, she didn't follow the rules. Mainly I was jealous because I was like, I want to look cool too, but I followed the rules and she didn't even read them. You know, I was judging. Anyway, we get in the room and we're lining up in the ballroom. That girl is in there and Marvin's right next to me. When they call numbers to step forward, he is called and she is called and I am not. And those are Marvin and Nina from Cycle 20. Marvin, you might remember, is the runner-up, and Nina was 7th place in Cycle 20. So the first time I made it far, I was trying to be too shocking and vulgar and whatever. And this time I was trying to be too demure, too perfect. And these two people who were just being themselves ended up getting into the show and doing very well, right? So I was like, okay, what's the secret formula here? Like, what do they want from me? So I was like, okay, I was trying too hard to be bold. I was trying too hard to be demure. Like, I just need to be myself. Which, you know, we're going to learn later on in this convo that wasn't really the right answer either. So that was the third casting I did. And then I was like, okay, you know what? I've been traveling a lot for these castings. Not gonna make it my whole identity anymore. I'm doing too much. I had a friend in film school the following year in 2013, and she was like, oh, let's send in an audition tape and I can help you make it and it's going to be great. So we filmed all around Vegas. We had all these different backdrops, great lighting, great audio. I was awkward as shit. I'm like, with these long blonde hair extensions, I looked really good at that point. And then I'm just like, hi, I am Raquel. I'm gonna be on America's Next Top Model. I had no camera skills whatsoever and was just completely awkward and rigid. So didn't hear anything back from that one either. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. This is not meant to be. And at that point, I was actually modeling. I had recently done a few photo shoots with some well-known photographers in town. From there, other people were asking me to work with them. But I was like, I'm ready to just do this on my own and not with this show. The following year, I signed with an agency and I started working. One of the clients was a hairstylist and fashion designer from Japan, and they asked me to model in Japan 6 months out. They were like, we want you to come with us. It's a 2-week trip to Japan. You'll go to all these different cities. We'll pay you, of course. We'll fly you there, and we'll also show you the culture and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's all I've ever wanted. First of all, Japan's my number one place in this world that I want to go to, always has been. But secondly, that's the reason I wanted to model in the first place, was to travel. So I was like, all right, here we go. I just started modeling and about to start traveling. Everything's coming up for Kelly. Around that same time, I had actually applied to go teach in Japan. It was very weird, very synchronous. So I was in that process as well. Right after getting asked to model in Japan, I was sent to an LA Fashion Week casting, drove out to LA, story as old as time, and was in a big long line for the Style Fashion Week casting. I don't believe Style Fashion Week still exists. It was similar to Art Hearts, where you can work with like multiple designers. There's a bunch of hair and makeup artists backstage, and it's like this big collaborative production. So I'm in line waiting to like see the casting directors for the show, give them my comp card. Had just signed with a new agency, so I have like these really nice new comp cards. As I'm in line, I see this woman walking down the line and asking each girl, "Hey, have you ever auditioned for America's Next Top Model?" And I'm hearing them be like, "Oh, no, I haven't." And she's like, "Oh," kind of talking to them. And I'm kind of smirking. I'm like, "Oh, can't wait for her to come ask me." So I'm eavesdropping on all of this stuff. And eventually she makes her way to me. I'm anticipating the question and I'm going to say, "Well, yes, actually, I have." But she doesn't ask me that question. She says, "Oh, and I know that you've applied." And I'm like, "Oh, do you?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, of course. We know about you. Yeah, we like you." And I was like, "Really?" Because I haven't made it very far in the last few auditions. And she's like, "No, I know. Every year we're looking for something a little bit different, but you've always been on our radar." And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's good to know." She's like, "We'd really love for you to apply this year." And, twist my arm. Why don't you? I've already applied 4 times. Yeah, I'm probably going to apply when one of the casting directors from the show is in front of me telling me that they like me. Seemed like a good omen. I write down her email on my comp card and I keep that one for myself. I end up emailing her probably on the spot and just being like, "Hey, it's me." Also, Janice Dickinson was at the casting and she gave us a little speech and everything. It was cute. I booked a few shows. I ended up having to stay with my cousins because I didn't realize like how long it was going to be. And luckily they took me in. They've always been so nice about that. During the shows, I met a couple girls. One was named Raina and the other was named Brittany. When you do a runway show, you line up backstage. They were talking about some show that they were both in, something about haircuts. And I was like, totally eavesdropping. I'm like, "Hey, what show are you guys talking about?" And they're like, "Oh, nothing. Just some little thing. You wouldn't have seen it." And I'm like, sure. And so later when I looked them up, I was like, "Oh my God, Raina was the runner up on Cycle 14, the first one that I auditioned for, beat out only by Krista, who I met." Brittany was from Cycle 20. Many Britneys have been in ANTM, but she was in Cycle 20 specifically. So I was like, well, that's cool. When you watch so many seasons of this, and at this point, I actually had kind of stopped watching it, I think because I didn't get in. So I was a little bit like butthurt. So then the casting director for ANTM was working with me very hands-on. She was like, "Oh, just send me like a really basic video," because that other one was like so high level, the lighting, the audio. She's like, "No, just film it with your digital camera." And it turned out so bad. Like the lighting, you could barely see it. And the sound, it sounded like I had this really deep and garbled voice. Like, "Hi, my name is Raquel and I'm America's Next Top Model." It was horrible. And I sent it to them anyway. And they were just like, "Great. We love it." It was this long process where I had to send them pictures, I had to send them other stuff, walking videos. They kept asking me for more stuff. During this time, I went down to Phoenix and had my interview to teach English in Japan. And I didn't get it. But I was like, you know what? At least I'm going to Japan in a couple of months. That's going to be more fun than going there and being a salaryman. But whatever, silver linings. So I'm doing this casting process and sending them all this stuff. At one point, I was at my best friend's wedding. I was the maid of honor, and they're like, "Hey, we need a picture right now." And I'm like, yeah, I'll send it in the morning. I'm kind of busy." And they're like, "Well, we're so close to getting you on the show. We just need that one last picture. Please send it to us right now. I don't care what you're doing." And I'm like, "Okay." So I'm wearing this purple bridesmaid dress and a cardigan and have purple sparkly eyeliner, drunk as fuck in these pictures. And those were the last pictures I sent them before they made their decision and picked me. During this time, a lot of stuff was happening. My grandma, who had been so excited for me on all of those other America's Next Top Model auditions, who had been so excited that I was going to Japan, she passed away. I started a job at the SLS Hotel, which used to be the Sahara and is now the Sahara, but had a brief stint as the SLS. And it had a pool club, which is where I was hired, and it also had a hotel pool. Okay, so I got a call from one of the other producers from ANTM, and he's like, "Hey, you're in." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" He's like, "You're in." He told me the details, and I had to be there about a week before I was supposed to go to Japan. I have never been so sweaty in my life, by the way. I was like saturated. When I hung up that phone, I was like, whew. So, yeah, a few things I had to take care of. It was very exciting, but it was very stressful too. And I was really sad that my grandma couldn't see it because she was my biggest fan. But I was like, okay, well, she's rooting for me. First I told my job and they were like, yeah, that's fine if you're going to be gone for a few months, but we're not going to have you work at the pool club anymore. We're going to move you to the hotel pool. And this comes up later. Don't worry. This is a very important detail of this story. So then I was asking the casting directors, like, hey, I know we have to sign this NDA. I know we can't tell anybody, but I have to tell these clients who are going to take me to Japan because they need to know why I'm not there. They were like, oh, I wouldn't do that because you might get eliminated and be back in time to go, which was strange. And I should have known it was strange. But I was just kind of like, well, that's not going to happen. So I did call the clients. I told them, hey, I'm going to be on this big show. I can't really tell you what it is, but I can't really say no. I'll send you however much money it costs to transfer my ticket, but I can't do it. They were so sad. It was so hard. They were like, please change your mind. We're so excited to have you. After I hung up, I cried so much. That was such a hard decision. And I know it sounds pretty privileged to complain about having to choose America's Next Top Model, but the whole reason I wanted to model in the first place was to travel, and it just sucked. Or to be on America's Next Top Model. You know what I mean? It was like the two biggest opportunities I could have, and I had to choose between them. So that sucked. And then suddenly it was time to go on the show. I didn't do that much to prepare. I mean, I binge watched the show. I watched it on YouTube and it was that reverse image. Like, I didn't have the funds to actually stream it. And then I did an H&M clothing haul. I got to bring 2 suitcases full of clothing and fly to LAX. At this point, I've never flown to LAX. I'm living in Vegas. I never had a reason to. So getting there was really cool. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm having my Miley Cyrus moment, rolling up to LAX. I get there and they have a Sprinter van waiting to take me to my hotel. Join me for part 2 next Tuesday. I'd like to give a big shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Fairy Circle Fiber Arts. If you haven't finished Christmas shopping for that special someone, first of all, you're crazy. And second of all, you're just like me. Give them the gift of fiber, and I'm not talking about your diet. Patterns are available on Etsy and Ravelry, and they can be found on Instagram at fairycircle.fiberarts. Thank you so much for listening. Please hit that follow or subscribe button, and I'll see you next Tuesday.